the most popular team in FPL going into game week 1. Today, we are going through an update of the FPL template with just 3 days between now and the start of the Premier League season. We'll be looking at who are the most highly owned players. We'll be looking at what is actually the most highly selected squad, where potentially we can beat it, and what I think of it overall. What is up, everyone? FPL Harry here. Before we dive in, 1,016 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you are new around here as well. I hope you're all having a good final run-in of the FPL season. Of course, just 3 days left. I am using Fantasy Football Scout to power all of these videos. If you are interested in them, do check the link in the description. There is 40% off still between now and pre-season. But what we're going to do today is have a look at 3 different teams. We're going to have a look at the most highly owned 15 in the moment, which is 14.5 million over budget. You can see it up on screen already. We're then going to take a look at the overall template when you're looking together for all of the players that we've got in the game. And then I put a tweet out on Twitter asking for you to submit your drafts for a more engaged sort of Twitter active template that we're going to build. And we'll see where that compares and differs to the overall template of the 5 million players that have already signed up to play the game. So that is the plan for today. Starting in with the draft that is the most highly owned 15 players in the game at the moment. David Raya and Turner are the most 2 highly owned goalkeepers. David Raya is one of those picks that was popular early on because he was an auto pick keeper, that actually recently is becoming much more popular in terms of general teams being put together. He is the cheapest route into the Arsenal defense. I personally don't love it unless you plan to wildcard late. I look at the opening 5 games with Villa away, Spurs away, Man City away, and think if you're going to get the most out of David Raya, he needs to be a long-term pick. Matt Turner is the second goalkeeper that we've got. He's 4 million. There is absolutely no reason why anyone watching this should have Matt Turner in their teams. He's the most highly owned and will play, I'm almost certain he'll play absolutely 0 minutes this season. And the only thing you risk by having Matt Turner in your team is that he might drop in price several times over the first few weeks once people realise he's not playing and then they sell him from their team. So Raya I quite like as a pick. I have spoken about him a lot. I could find a route from him, but I'm not sure I want that because I do think a game week 6 wildcard is quite popular going into the start of the season. So you do have 3 tough away games, so it's maybe not worthwhile. Turner definitely shouldn't be in any of the drafts. Moving into defense, looking at some of the popular defenders, Trent is only going to go up and up in ownership. Gvardiol is similar. Saliba and Pedro Porro are next. Saliba, again, looking at that Arsenal defense, they look so good and he has goal threat. I think he's worth the 0.5 over David Raya. That's why I'm certain, well, I don't think I'm going to start with Raya for the start of the season because if I want an Arsenal defender, I'm much more likely to go with Saliba. Pedro Porro is next. He's one that the sort of underlying data models also really like, and we'll see that in one of the templates that we've got in a minute. He's good. The attacking threat is there, but Spurs, of course, do concede an awful lot of goals. And going into the start of the season, the first 2 games are good. Away at Leicester, though, away on the opening day, I don't really think we're going to get a clean sheet there. Then it's Everton at home, which is a decent fixture for them. And then it's Newcastle and Manchester City. So there are some mixed fixtures in there for Spurs and Pedro Porro. Out of these, my favourites at the moment is definitely Trent and Gvardiol. I understand the Saliba pick. Pedro Porro feels like one of those that a lot of people are going for if they can't quite stretch to a Gvardiol or a Saliba. He was also in a lot of auto pick teams at the start of the season. Like, I would much prefer to go for a Munoz at Crystal Palace and a 4.5 defender over a Pedro Porro and a 4 million defender, for example. The final sort of most owned defender that we've got at the moment is Anderson of Crystal Palace. 4.5 million. He is popular because he rotates really well with pretty much every defender that you could want. If you've gone with Konza, if you've gone with Dan Burn, if you've gone with Robinson, or you've gone with Mikalenko, the other popular 4.5s, Anderson is the best one to rotate with pretty much all of those. I posted defender rotations on Twitter, Instagram, and we did a whole video on it. So check that out if you want to understand why. But that is why he's in there, just because he fits into a lot of squad structures. Again, he's not my favourite of the 4.5 million options. He's probably not even in the top 2. I would definitely have Anthony Robinson above him as my number 1 pick at the moment. Looking at midfielders, Salah is in there at the moment, but he's now in 35% of teams. So 1 in 3 teams has him. And that just continues to drop as the ownership of Haaland continues to rise between now and game week 1. I do think that there are alternatives to Salah. I spoke about it in my draft video yesterday. Gordon is still very highly owned. He's the same price as someone like Diego Jota, though, that we'll talk about in a moment. I do think Gordon is great. There is a slight risk of minutes going into the start of the season. He's only played 45 minutes in pre-season. I do think Gordon should start game week 1, but I'm not certain he'll get more than 60, 70 minutes when he might come off for Harvey Barnes just to make sure he is ready for the start of the season. Eze, again, feels like he's in the most popular drafts whenever you post them. Brentford away, just conceded 4 in pre-season. A pick I really like. Cole Palmer is next, very expensive. For me, he's one of the players, along with Watkins, that I've been pretty sort of bullish that are not worth their price tag for the start of the season. I do think Palmer will start game week 1 as a Chelsea fan, but we're not certain exactly where he's going to fit in. He is also 10.5 million. It is a lot when you have an Nkunku at 6.5. Yes, Nkunku's not going to score the same number of points as Palmer, but I don't think there's 4 million in budget difference between the two. Plus, at the price of Palmer, you can buy someone like a Bukayo Saka, who is the 5th midfielder that we've got here. Wolves at home on the opening day. I really like Saka, and he goes up and up in my estimations, as I think Arsenal will go very, very close to winning the league again this season. How far, again, do we expect Chelsea to go this season? Where are you predicting them to finish? Now, they didn't have a great season last year, and Palmer was still a good asset, but I much prefer Saka over Palmer. For me, Palmer has not been in a single one of my drafts for game week 1. Then up front, the most highly owned forwards at the moment is Erling Haaland, Alexander Isak, and Watkins. Haaland, again, is just going up and up in ownership, 45% owned now. Started about 30% when the game launched. I imagine it will pass 50% once game week 1 does go around. Isak is the most popular sort of active striker in the game. Watkins does have a very high ownership, but 9 million for him, again, going into the start of the season. I'm not certain on it. He's not played any preseason minutes yet. I do expect him to start. Away at West Ham, though, who have strengthened, and then it's Arsenal. Game week 3 onwards, it does look much better, but I'm not certain for the start of the season that he's worth the budget. So, of course, this team is 14 million overpriced, but the two that I think you can downgrade, Palmer, Watkins, and as I've said several times now, I think the Haaland-Salah combined draft is just weaker than the other drafts. We'll have a look at this in the video that we're going to do tomorrow as well, but I think you need to pick one of Haaland and Salah, and I also don't think Palmer and Watkins are massively worth the money. Everyone else in here, I can absolutely put a case forward that you should be picking. Maybe you can put a case forward for Watkins in there as well. Of course, Salah and Haaland, but those are the 3 areas that I think are glaringly obvious that that's where I downgrade and aren't worth the money for game week 1. Now, having a look at the overall template that does fit into the budget, so this leaves no money in the bank. Most people in goal for overall are going with Flecken and the 4.0 backup in Valdemarsson at Brentford. Of course, the benefit to this is you have 2 goalkeepers. So if Flecken was to get injured or he was to get dropped, for example, you do have the natural backup, which isn't the case for many other teams. You can do it with Pickford, for example, but of course he's 5 million. A lot of people looking at Nottingham Forest, they don't have it. A lot of people looking at Crystal Palace, of course, they don't have it at the moment while Johnston is there. If he does leave, you can do Crystal Palace with Henderson and then Matthews on the bench. Moving to defence, of course, there aren't 4 premium defenders. Trent and Gvardiol are the most popular generally. It is pretty closely, but is very highly owned, and he is starting to creep into a few more drafts, as is Pedro Porro as well. Robinson comes in as he rotates really, really nicely with Anderson again. Those are my favourite rotation for the start of the season. Robinson is definitely my best and favourite 4.5 million defender, and then we've got Barker, who I just think is worth the gamble. For me, he's the best risk you can take as a 4 million defender. None of the others really I expect to do very well, and you may as well take the gamble on a 5th defender being a Brighton left back. Even if they do sign someone else in that position who they are linked with from Fenerbahce, it's not certain that he'll come in and play left back. He can also play on the right and a few positions in defensive midfield as well. So I do like Barco, and I think that defense does look really strong. Looks very similar to the defense I have in my draft, but I didn't bother with Anderson because from game week 2 onwards, you just place Trent, Gvardiol and Robinson. You don't actually need Anderson. And in game week 1, he goes away at Brentford. Just play Barco in that and downgrade it is probably what I would say. Into midfield, again, if you downgraded Anderson to a 4.0, you could do Rodgers up to Smith Rowe. I think that is a much better use of your money. I'm going off Rodgers a little bit. The preseason form for Aston Villa ended really badly. Rodgers, the goals dried up for him. Watkins has not been back in training. West Ham away, and then they play Arsenal in the first 2. I don't love it quite as much. He's still probably my favourite of the 5.0s, or you could have a look at someone like Adama Traore at Fulham, who I think is going massively under the radar. Anthony Gordon is still in there at the moment, but there are some other 7.5 midfielders we'll speak about who are becoming more popular. Then Eze, and then it's Nkunku. As I said, Palmer's not for me worth the 10.5 for game week 1, so a lot of people going with Nkunku instead. And then it is Bukayo Saka again. So a lot of these are the most highly owned, but the places that I said you should probably use to free up money in Palmer, in Watkins, and then probably Mo Salah are the 3 areas that most people are looking at that template or the most highly owned 11 and saying, yeah, that is where we can downgrade and free up some money. So then up front, Haaland is in, of course, at the moment, Alexander Isak, and then people are going completely torn. Wood and Muniz, Wood of Nottingham Forest, Muniz at Fulham. It is a complete lottery about which of them you could pick. If I had to pick right now, I would probably just about favour Muniz, but if you're going with Smith Rowe in midfield, I can understand why you'd go with Wood. This team looks really, really solid. I do like it. I do think the Haaland and no Salah draft does look nice, but with only Trent in there, you do make yourself a little bit more open to Liverpool doing really well and you not getting enough points. But this overall template, I can understand why it's so popular. There are a few things I would change. I wouldn't have Anderson. I would upgrade Rodgers, and I'm not sure I would start with Gordon, and I might look at a Liverpool midfielder instead. And that is basically what happens when we start to look at the FPL sort of Twitter Engage Manager template. Again, this is from 500 screenshots at time recording that I was sent on Twitter. I've gone through them, had a look at the players who I think are very popular. Henderson is becoming more and more popular over Flecken, again, because it looks like he's slightly more assured for minutes, because it looks like Johnson is going to leave, and he's played pretty much all of pre-season and played the minutes at the end of last season as well. There is a little bit of cutting budget in defence, so people have gone with Pedro Porro over Gvardiol, and they've dropped down from that 4.5 million defender to Haaland, which I did say is probably the best thing to do. Porro I don't love. It does feel like one of those things that it is very data driven. If you look at a lot of the models, they recommend Porro as a fantastic pick for the start of the season. I personally don't love it as much, but if you need 0.5 million budget spare, I can understand why you would go Pedro Porro. Into midfield, people are starting to drop Anthony Gordon and go with a Liverpool midfielder. Again, it is Diego Jota slightly over Luis Diaz. It's pretty close. Jota just feels more explosive. He's slightly less nailed, absolutely, than Diaz, it feels like. But he's playing number 9. He's so clinical when he gets chances. So that's why Jota's in my team. And I think that's why people are going with him there. And then it's a downgrade of Rodgers to a 4.5 million option in wings. And this is basically because people are clambering to buy Dominic Solanke. 7.5 million, the downgrades that you've got in midfield and in defence have freed up the money to go from a Wood on Muniz up to Solanke. And this is the sort of engaged, active manager on Twitter, what they're trying to build for game week 1 going into the final few days. Again, you can see the players in sort of blue there that are highlighted that are the ones different from the overall template. To be honest, I don't think it's that much stronger. It just depends on how much you rate Solanke going into those first 2 games. Leicester away, Everton at home. If you think he's worth it, then absolutely, yeah, it's worth the downgrades. But I think Jota is a better pick for me than Gordon. He's in my draft over Gordon. Just because the minutes for the first couple, I'm not 100% certain that Harvey Barnes might not get a start or strong minutes off the bench. Again, downgrading from a 5 million to a 4.5 wings, I don't love. It doesn't give you, this team doesn't have good enough squad depth, right? Wings, Barco and Haaland as your bench options doesn't feel strong enough. It feels like people are just trying to force in that one extra player, when in this, I would probably sacrifice one player, whether it's an Nkunku, whether it's a Solanke, and upgrade Winks to a Smith Rowe or something like that. Maybe get an extra defender if you are going to go with Pedro Porro, because he has 2 difficult fixtures in the first 4. But I can understand what people are doing, and Solanke is becoming so popular. This is the overall sort of active engaged manager template. We've had a look at how it compares to sort of the overall 5 million player template that are being built between now and the start of the season. Of course, the player base is likely to double between now and game week 1, so the template might massively change. But with 3 days to go, this is where we're at. Let me know what you think. How are your teams different to this? How many players do you own in both the Twitter template and the overall template? I think I have about 8 or 9 in both of them. Slightly different in terms of structure as well. Let me know if you're very template or you're going a little bit away, and what picks you are using to differentiate from the template. Again, we've got 3 days. There will be a video every single day between now and the start of the season. Thank you so much for watching. 1,023 likes is the aim. Subscribe if you're new around here, and I'll be back again very soon.